What is going on, PrizePicks family, and welcome back to the channel. Today's video is episode 2 of the opening line. And before I introduce our guest, who I'm very excited to have on the show, I just want to remind you guys about the giveaway that we run on every video. Make sure you guys leave a like, leave a comment, and or subscribe to the YouTube channel, and you'll be entered into winning a free 5-pick flex to win $100. That'll be personally loaded into your account by yours truly. So make sure to leave a like, leave a comment, thank Matt for being here, ask him a question, follow up on what you learned in this interview, and make sure you're subscribed. So with that being said, I would like to introduce our guest for the opening line, and that is Matt Moody. Matt's a fantasy hockey expert. He is the host of his own podcast called the Morningscape Pod. He is the host of Hockey Picks and Bets. It's on the Mayo Media Network. I believe you just started doing that this year, correct?
That's right, yeah.
And in addition to that, he is a regular in these DFS streets. He's a friend of mine personally, and he's someone who I personally consider to be the sharpest DFS NHL mind out there. Might be a bold take by some, but I don't think it's that bold at all. He's the guy who I kind of credit with my profitability in NHL DFS for the past 4 years. So with that being said, Matt, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for having me. So, you said a lot of kind things. I do just want to address something right off the top. One of the highest volume guys in the NHL streets, I'm not going to name names here, once told me the same thing, but also this was 3 or 4 years ago, told me that I sucked at building my own lineups. So, I worked with him for a little bit, and, over time I just got a lot better. So, awesome to hear you say that. Much appreciative. But yeah, no, hockey's my thing. Super pumped about the Mayo Media Network gig. Definitely check that out. Fantasy Hockey Picks and Bets. The show is sponsored by PrizePicks, so a nice little segue there into sort of what I do, and also what you're doing here. So thanks for having me.
Yeah, that was a cool way for us to sort of rekindle our friendship, because I know we had like maybe I'm using the term friendship loosely because I've always considered you a friend, but it's that online friend type of thing. Like a lot of my best friends personally are guys that I've met in the Twitter streets, in the DFS streets. Like I've met them online. I never met them in person, or I maybe met them just a couple times in person. So you're one of those guys who I know, in New York City, I was going to NYU at the time. I was living in a dorm called Alumni on 9th and 3rd, and you were attending St. John's at the time, correct? Which is across the street.
Yes, yeah, I went to St. John's, and I was going to the Manhattan campus every day. So we were basically right across the street from one another.
Right.
Funny enough, I ran into you one day, had no idea what was going on. I'm pretty sure I had my headphones in. I was going to the train to go home. I'm like, all right, I'm out, like I'm done.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty sure I tried to walk away from you like 3 or 4 times before I sort of clicked. And I'm like, oh yeah, like real person in real life,
Yeah.
So,
I mean, man, when someone approaches you on Astor Place, your first inclination should be just to walk away from that person. Like,
yeah, dude.
I was in a rush too. I was coming back from class. I was coming back from the Washington Square Park area, class, eating, something like that.
Yep.
And I was actually thinking about you. We were having like a conversation. Like it was one of those really weird things where like you're thinking about someone and then you run into them. Like it was so crazy for me. That's why you were probably caught off guard by my reaction, because I was in a rush going back to Alumni. I had some shift to start, some RA shift or something. And I remember I saw you, and I didn't see you from a distance. I saw you when you were right in front of me. And I just had to I'm pretty sure I just grabbed you. And I was like, hey, man.
Yeah. No, dude.
Probably not the move.
I've never, I don't think I've thought more about a single interaction than that one, just because I know it was so awkward. It was so random, but like, it's also just one hell of a story to come back to, years down the line. Here we are crossing paths again, just like, professionally. It's just like, pretty cool to, just to have that little, literally that one moment.
I know we talked about linking up after that, but there was one thing or another. I know you were commuting at the time, and I was working like 30 hours a week RAing, and then school on top of that. It never ended up happening, which I kind of, it's definitely unfortunate considering now we're on different sides of the country and it's just not possible. But, it was definitely an awkward interaction, but it's one that I'm glad I had with you, because I definitely I've never been that kind of guy just to if I see someone, I'm usually the kind of guy that's like, let me avoid this conversation. But I really respected all the work you were doing. You helped me so much in NHL DFS that I was like, I have to say what's up to this guy. And then the fact that I didn't see you from a distance, I just saw you when you were right in front of me, didn't give me enough time to like chicken out of the conversation. I was like, I'm just gonna grab this guy's arm and just start talking, see what happens.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely just one of the crazier things that's happened to me in real life, and
Right. But
also online, I guess. So
absolutely. But before we get into like all of that stuff and how you got into DFS, I kind of want to go back even farther, like towards like your childhood. Did you, because I know like personally with me, I think there was a lot of qualities in my childhood growing up that I realized now looking back on that I can see why I ended up in the place that I did, like in this DFS space, why I'm so obsessed with this stuff. Is there anything in your childhood that you can look back on that kind of like, I assume you played hockey, but is there anything like else that you kind of, I was obsessed with games and strategy growing up. Is there anything that you can like look back on, any qualities that you're like, that makes sense that it ended up where I'm at right
yeah, probably the main thing, I'm just looking at my Yahoo Mail inbox right now, and my first email address, not the one I currently use, was NASCAR1398 at Yahoo.
now?
And I made it, when I'm pretty sure I was 7 or 8. I made it solely to play in my parents in the neighborhood fantasy NASCAR league for money. And I don't remember winning or anything, but I was 7, 8 years old doing fantasy NASCAR drafts with a bunch of drunk people, basically a bunch of drunk rednecks, like just,
Yeah.
small town outside of Rochester, New York. But they love NASCAR. I loved NASCAR as a kid, sort of fell out of love with it when Dale Sr. died. But I would say I got started early, and my dad's definitely a gambler. We would always go to Sabres games. We went to the local AHL team. So hockey was just always my thing growing up. I also played some baseball, but yeah, it's definitely not a surprise to see the intersection of fantasy sports and especially hockey, just given a lot of what I did growing up was sports related and even math related. I was always a math guy. So
Interesting. So you grew up in the Buffalo area. You said you went to Sabres games. Is that correct?
Yeah. I grew up just outside of Rochester. Went to Brockport High School. So shout out to all the Brockport homies out there.
Shout out. So I'm assuming were you a football fan at all? Because it's interesting that you got your start in fantasy NASCAR. That's probably like was that your start? Did you play any fantasy football at age 6?
Yeah, I don't remember. I remember playing some like fantasy baseball league that was just me and my mom in it, and we'd watch the Yankees all the time. I think I was like 8 or 9, but I remember doing like the whole neighborhood like getting together for every NASCAR race and just having a blast. So one of my neighbors had a bumper pool table.
Mm-hmm.
I never played bumper pool otherwise, and I still remember how fondly I loved just playing bumper pool there. So it's just like one of those childhood things that I definitely always come back to. So I grew up in the era of Buffalo Bills football where it wasn't worth it to get invested.
Right.
So my dad, diehard Bills fan, he would really get up and down with the Bills. I think part of why I'm so easy, even keeled and easygoing when it comes to like the ups and downs of gambling and fantasy sports is because I sort of watch my dad get upset by it. I'm just like, I'm not going to let that happen to me. It sucks when they're bad, but I also I like having these other things to look forward to, so in hockey, the Sabres are terrible again, but I can,
go ahead.
And so I can just look around the rest of the league and say like, oh, well, this is, my guy in the Sharks or whatever. It's just like, or daily fantasy even, just like, it's always something else to look forward to. And I just think I don't let myself get bogged down by the trials and tribulations of the Bills, which of course now have passed on and hopefully they can, continue things. But I would say I'm a football fan, but not like a diehard or anything like that, like hockey.
Yeah, you bring up such an important quality for any like DFS players, something that I personally struggled with a lot when I was getting my bearings in DFS. It's just that discipline, that never get too high, never get too low. It all kind of ties hand in hand with bankroll management, all kinds of stuff that we've preached on this channel before, and I preached in my past before. It's something that when I got started in the DFS space, I was 16, back when you had to just check a box to play on DraftKings and say you were over 18. I was in high school, and I remember you're not really apt with controlling your emotions back then. So I remember just swinging up and down based on the results of. I always swung up and down based on the results of the Nuggets or the Broncos or the England national team. As far as soccer goes, I remember those are the times that I remember crying as a child, like anytime they lost or something like that. And so I wasn't apt to deal with that in DFS. So it's cool that you kind of could recognize that at an early age and have that ability to like remain even keel on your emotions when dealing with this stuff. Because I mean, hey man, you've had some big wins in DFS. Let's not undersell that. Like I've been around for 10 years. I don't think I've ever had a tournament win over 20,000, 10,000, something like that. And you've had multiple bigger than that. So talk to me a little bit about that.
Yeah, the first one that kind of just set everything crazy. I'd had 3K, 5K here, there, whatever, a couple years ago. March of 2019 at the Honda, I think it was, and Keith Mitchell won that tournament for me, and I took a single bullet in the $44 and turned it into 100K. Like that was the most magical, weekend. Honestly, most magical Sunday afternoon of my life. Like I knew Saturday I had a chance, so I spent Saturday night like hedging out a showdown lineup, and I wasn't even hedging the big money in the 44. I was hedging like $100 ticket here, or that sort of thing, the satellites that I was playing in.
Right.
And I just went on an absolute god run on Sunday afternoon. I think Justin Thomas shot like 6 under on the back or something ridiculous like that, to just he finished like 20th. Like it wasn't him who did it, and then it just came down to Keith Mitchell, and that was something else. But I consider that more of like just a luck box. And frankly, a lot of, any GPP win is a lot of just luck and, getting lucky. I had 50 lineups that weekend, just picked one of them to put in the 44. And what do you know? The others were $5 and they sucked. So, that was the start of it. And then I just sort of had some money to play with basically. So I took shots at hockey for the most part. I think last October, maybe November, I had a bunch of qualifiers into like the 360 Spinorama. That was like their first big tournament of the year. And I think I put 3 entries in the top 5 on a James Neal 4 goal game. Like just, again, just one of those ridiculous things where it's just like, all right, come on guys, like you can stop scoring now. But just, so I've definitely had a good run of things, just luck wise, but you got to put yourself in position to succeed. And I don't even know when we'll get to talking about like the podcast and all that, but
Right.
it does go to show when you put in a lot of work and a lot of effort, it doesn't pay off immediately. I still remember grinding quarter games like when I was in college, like you're saying, just like a college kid, and that was just fun. So I think you definitely need to know what your goals are, and just work hard, because it's fun. If you're not having fun, there's really no point in doing any of this stuff. So
Right.
that's probably the best advice I could give. Otherwise it's just just keep going at it and try and get lucky, because that's a lot of what fantasy sports and daily fantasy is.
No, it's great advice. 'Cause you say like you did put in the time to put yourself in that position to get lucky. I was listening to the poker podcast that I'm a big fan of. It's called Sessions, and this guy had Doug Polk on, the guy who runs this. His name's DGAF Poker Player. He had Doug Polk on, who I don't know if you're familiar with Doug Polk, professional poker player, content creator in the poker space. And he talked about how it's so important that when you're getting started in the industry, be it poker, be it DFS, because they're so similar, that you kind of have to run hot when you get started in order to build a bankroll or get yourself in this space. And there's so many poker pros and in turn DFS pros that we've missed out on because they just didn't run hot when they started. So you mentioned that hockey or that golf bank being like just running hot and getting lucky, which sure you can make a case for that. But the hockey bank, I mean, I think you posted in that tweet, I think it's still your pinned tweet, that ship on GPP. And I think you replied to that tweet saying that you were shocked that all those players are available under 5%, which is just like, those players were obvious to you, except for like Keith Yandel or someone like that. But those players were obvious to you, but they all came in under 5%. That's a product of you putting in the effort, the extra research to figure out good correlated spots to target. And that's not, it's luck that you got the result that you got, but it's not luck to put yourself in that situation. I mean, to get 3 James Neal lineups in the top 5 or the top 5, you said?
I think it might have been 5, but somewhere in the top 5. Yeah, just ridiculous stuff. But yeah, no, that's exactly it. Like, it's a lot of what I think goes, not I wouldn't even call myself a content creator. I have a regular 9-to-5 job,
Right.
9 to 6 usually. Like, I do a lot of this on the side, very specifically on the side. But it's also just something where it's it's no fun to just say like, oh, these are all good plays, like just play everyone, like,
Right.
because theoretically that's true. Blender HD or Blenderhead, play all the dudes, like,
Right.
play whoever you want. That's all fine. But I'm just sort of sitting there trying to go through my process on the air almost, and just sort of like, even if I'm not helping anyone else, I'm still helping myself, because when I'm at work, when I'm busy, I can go back and listen to someone who I trust, myself, but hear thoughts about it again, and just sort of have those things drilled in. So that's sort of how I have, for the last 4 years, I guess, sort of told myself like that's why the podcast is worth it, because frankly, there's unless you're a big name, it's not like you're getting tons of money to do anything.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So it's just a lot of time and effort for for what I consider to be myself, and also the community that we've built with the Morningscape podcast. It's just like super, even if I'm having an off day or whatever, other people are on top of things. Just there's always information out there that you can uncover, and just different thoughts and different viewpoints that I love to hear from, especially in the run up to a slate. Like that's something that I find really valuable, that
Right.
like couldn't have happened without the podcast or whatever. So
Right. And that's a good transition into Morningscape Pod. So Morningscape Pod, like I mentioned in the intro, is the podcast that you started. I believe you started this probably in 2016. Go ahead. When did you
that
start?
sounds right. Yeah, that sounds right. 2016. Yeah, so basically, I guess just do the full
Sure.
daily fantasy thing at this point. So I started out, I believe I started playing on FanDuel like college football while I was studying abroad, my sophomore year of college, which would have been 2014.
Right.
And I just wanted some connection to back home. And so I was like, oh, FanDuel, that looks fun. I think I had a friend who was like, oh, like, do this. It's like,
Yeah.
okay. And so I came home and I was just like playing around with it. Actually, at the time, my buddy DJ and I, were co-hosts of the Morningscape Pod. We ran a Sabres website, and nothing ever really happened crazy with it. We wrote some pretty good blog posts. I believe one of ours made like the Puck headlines on Puck Daddy. And that was just like a huge crowning achievement.
Sure.
But it was something that we just did for fun on the side, and we both obviously had a bunch of spare time. So we both progressively got into daily fantasy, and around came the DraftKings. I can't even remember what it was called, but it was the DraftKings Hockey Podcast.
Okay.
And at the time I was writing for Fantasy Insiders, which
Right.
was basically the first time I'd ever been paid to do anything in fantasy sports, which was, awesome. I was spending every day like 5 hours a day writing this huge article that like 10 people would read.
I remember. So I was one of those 10 people.
Yeah, no, exactly. But, so that was more of like a labor of love, but I was also just something where I was like, man, like that podcast went away. And I'm like, DJ, like, we should do this, because what we would do is we would just call each other for an hour up until lock, just like talking through things. And we've
Yeah.
been like that since we were kids. Oh, what happened to the Sabres in 2009? I'm sure there's a phone call of DJ and I for an hour just talking about like Jochen Hesch or whatever.
Right.
So we just decided to sort of put this into a podcast format and see if it worked. We're not even a big podcast now, but each year we've seen more and more listeners come in, and finally, sort of, I wouldn't even call it like a big break or anything, but when Pat Mayo comes knocking, it's a pretty,
It's a big break.
it's a really cool, just a wild thing to just even think about, even 2 years ago, just like, so Pat Mayo was just looking to start a hockey show. He was on Davis Maddox podcast, and they talked like, oh, we want someone, I was thinking about doing a hockey show, and I want like two bros with good chemistry who are just comfortable talking about hockey.
Perfect.
And I listened to that, and I had to rewind it. I'm like, wait, did I just hear that right? So, I sent Mayo an email, but turns out I didn't even need to, because so many of our listeners just like reached out on, because he tweeted out the next day, like, hey, know any good hockey podcasters? And we just had so many people like tagging us. It was just like, oh my God, like, he came out and reached out to us afterward. He was just like, yeah, that was so impressive. And so a lot of that's just credit to, some of it's DJ and myself for being there, showing up, doing the work. But a lot of it is to the people who have invested so much of their time and energy into us in our podcast and our community, because it really is a great place to just hang out and sweat hockey games, and in the off season just talk about whatever you want. So yeah, just sort of like a crazy ride, but really happy to, I guess, be here.
Right. I mean, definitely a crazy ride. And it started, I mean, that's when I first heard of you, the Fantasy Insider days. I was on that MLB podcast, and I remember I was trying to get into fantasy hockey, and I was reading your article every day, or however often you posted. It was so long ago, I can't even recall.
I think it was every day,
It was
like
every day,
Monday
right?
through Friday. Yeah.
Yeah, it was a daily thing, which is so, so time consuming, but you really were grinding for, like you said, labor or love. It's a great way to put it. And I remember talking to you and reaching out to you in that Slack chat a couple times, and you were kind enough to like help me out and show me the ropes. I mean, I still use the information that you told me to this day. The first NHL video I put out on this channel, which was a little intro to NHL on PrizePicks, giving people some insight as to like what stats, research, trends to look for when they're making their entries. The main thing I told people is like, you want guys that shoot the puck. It's hockey. Like that's the first thing you ever told me. You were like, just take guys who shoot the puck. Like, I remember you introduced me to ICF per 60. I dropped that stat on to the community that's watching this video. It was really influential to me. So something that I keep in mind, like pretty much every day where I would be in these NHL streets making entries, like I would keep in mind, I'd look at my lineup and I'd be like, do these guys shoot the puck? Like Matt said in 2016. And like, like lo and behold, like you kind of set the trend for DFS research in hockey going forward. And it's awesome, man. Like, but just to talk a little bit more about Morningscape Pod, like you started it in 2016. You, like you said, you put in the work every day to grow a community. You're in Discord. What are your future plans for Morningscape Pod? Do you plan on expanding it? I know this past off season was a little bit of a quiet spot in the Discord. I know it kind of turned into a little bit of a
Yeah.
political discourse. I'll honestly, man, not to throw myself under the bus, but I hopped in there once or twice. I haven't been in there anymore recently because you can't play DFS when you work for DFS site. But
Yep.
I'd hop in there over the summer once in a while just to kind of rile up Bobby Boom and get the conversation going. But
Oh my God, dude.
I say that. Do you have like what are your plans for this coming off season? Do you plan on expanding? I know you play MLB a fair amount. Do you plan on expanding into a MLB version of it, or
Yeah,
what are your plans?
the thing for, I think, DJ and I is that we do it again because it's fun for us, and because we genuinely think that we are putting out there into our little niche, or whatever you want to call it. That's sort of the lane we run in. I don't really think it would serve anyone all that well to have two clowns talking about like baseball or whatever, who hardly know much about it besides like, oh, just run this optimizer here.
Sure.
So we've thought about other things we could do, things like newsletters, or anything that's more engaging but not necessarily podcast form. We sold shirts last year. That was
Yeah.
a ton of fun. Actually, my sister runs like a crafting. I mean, she sells clothes too, but like she actually has her own company, small business. But so maybe there'll be things down the line with that. But for us, we're not really looking to get out of the exact like 9 to 5 grind. It's
Sure.
something that we've definitely made time for in our lives. And of course, if something absolutely floored me or him, I'm sure that would be a thought. But right now, it's very much so like we just give ourselves to the podcast. We give ourselves to the Mayo Media Show. That's twice a week over on the Mayo Media Network. So it's something where if the right thing comes up, then sure, it's a conversation. But for right now, I'm not really sure how much more there is to expand into
Sure.
versus sort of growing organically within the daily fantasy hockey space, which I think we have done this year, in large part thanks to Pat Mayo, but just in general, that's something that we just continue to try and grow, and maybe down the line, maybe capitalize on a bit more.
Yeah, I mean, it makes a lot of sense, and it's actually a pretty mature viewpoint, because like a lot of people see this ability to like make a dollar on the internet, and they kind of just run with it without and drop the stability of a 9 to 5 or something like that. That's something that I did personally. I literally am talking to myself when I'm saying this stuff. I did it myself, and I wanted to go back. I wanted to go back to have that 9 to 5 and grind these DFS sports betting streets on the side. I mean, I believe personally, like after a decade of this stuff, I believe that's the most healthy way to approach any sort of gambling, any sort of sports betting, any sort of DFS play, poker, be it, is to do it on the side. And because it's like once you make it your everything, you kind of, we talked about being even keel, but you're kind of forced to ride the waves of the ups and downs of the season, the ups and downs of the community, how they're all doing. So I like your answer in wanting to keep your 9 to 5, keep this on the side, and then have it grow organically and naturally. I think that, it makes a lot of sense. I think
Yeah, I couldn't imagine what these last, few months could have looked like for me personally if I didn't have a job to fall back on, because man, I had a great run in the bubble for hockey or whatever.
Mhm.
And, I tried, I was like, oh, like basketball, football, these things are going on. There's no hockey. Like, I'm going to dedicate myself to this sort of thing. And, it turns out it's really tough to make money regularly in daily fantasy. So, you
Sure.
really have to be principled and, really know, exactly what you're going for, and know that, there's a chance that you could, lose whatever you put into a slate. So,
Mhm.
I think it's just more of a, personality thing. If
Yeah.
if I was more risk, if I was more, willing to take on risk, like in my personal life,
Sure.
that's certainly something that could be on the table, I think. But for now, it's just like, why not sort of, when my job allows me to do something like this, with the freedom that I have, I can literally work until 5:30 and then do hockey stuff from 5:30 till 7 and pick my work back up, because, that sometimes that's necessary. And it's super nice to have the flexibility to, not be, I'm not out, I'm not out like, whatever, like at a restaurant or whatever. I don't
Sure.
have to be anywhere. I just sort of have to be at a computer to do work. So,
Sure.
it's just a real healthy thing for me, I think. But
Would you say that running Morningscape Pod? Now, I think you kind of answered this earlier, but would you say that running Morningscape Pod made you a better NHL DFS player?
I mean, 100%. There's only so many ways, I think, for you to get better at sort of assessing your own process
Mhm.
without actually verbalizing a lot of your thoughts, because you could look at a slate afterward and always say like, oh, well, I was about to put, whatever, Brock Nelson in this lineup and he scored 3 goals. So, I almost did it. But then, your centers end up being like McDavid and McKinnon. It's like, no, you weren't about to play Brock Nelson, like
Yeah.
you were paying up there. So, when you actually have to, not necessarily put yourself out there, because, it's not like we say, oh, play these guys and you're guaranteed to make money. But there really is just only so much you can do to assess your own, strengths and weaknesses when you really don't have anything to look at or reference, in the future. So, that's a big part of it. And then the other part is just getting pushback from people on like, hey,
Absolutely.
you said this about this player. And then I dive into it some more. And it's like, oh, yeah, actually, he got an empty net goal or whatever. And that, or hey, this guy was in the box and, this guy stepped out on the power play and scored in his stead. It's just like, that's not likely to continue. And so without that sort of continuous feedback, I think it would be a lot worse off than, it currently is.
Right. So it's like it's almost as if you have like a hundred pairs of eyes watching every NHL game because of all the people in there, and your community
Exactly.
is popping, man. Like during NHL games, you pretty much had someone in your NHL Discord, in the Morningscape Pod Discord, announce every goal that's happened for like the last 4 years. Like every goal on every play. Like I have your notifications on. I see it every time. Like there'll be like an obscure game going on, like you know how sometimes NHL will have like a bunch of games at 5 p.m. and then like one game at like 8 p.m. or 10
Yep.
p.m. Eastern time. And like that game will be up. It'll be like the Wild versus the Kings. It'll be like 0-0 in the third period. And some like random fourth liner will score, but that'll be in the Discord. Like that person,
Yeah.
someone will post it. And so just knowing that you built this community of like-minded NHL people who are all watching the games as if you would, like you
Yeah.
wish you could, if you had that many hours in the day, that many eyes, like it's pretty cool, man. It's a
Dude, it's so cool. Shout out to Jimmy, by the way, because Jimmy in the
Jimmy, right?
Discord is the guy who's always, posting in his copy pasted, goal, assist, whatever. But
Yeah,
there's no red zone for hockey. But the
right.
closest damn thing is being in that Discord and saying, oh, Vancouver power play. All right, let me, flip the channel there
Yeah,
and get that on. So, that's
yeah.
just a it's another perk.
I definitely did that a ton. So for anyone listening, if you want to get better at NHL DFS, go hop in that Morningscape Pod Discord, reach out to Matt, follow him on Twitter. It'll be underneath his name on this video, but it's also at Fake Moods on Twitter. And just get involved because, like I said earlier, he is the sharpest DFS mind in the space, in my opinion. And I think like just any amount of time you can spend around him, picking his brand and picking the brand of his community will be beneficial to anyone watching this video who wants to get better at NHL. And it's very, very relatable back to PrizePicks. I know PrizePicks hasn't reached Pennsylvania yet, so you haven't got a chance to really get involved with our product. But we've launched this NHL. We've launched single stat DFS across multiple sports, NHL being one of them. And so far the feedback that we've gotten, because it's fun to sweat fantasy scores, but sweating individual stats, we've seen that it's been super popular. People tend to prefer it over fantasy scores because just sweating Alex Ovechkin over 3.5 shots on goal is one of the most fun sweats ever, every slate, because he's just firing puck after puck after puck on the net. And you're just like, I hope this one gets through. I hope this one gets through. I hope this one gets through. So I'm excited for when you get a chance to test out our NHL single stat product or our fantasy score product. I think it's something you'd have a lot of success at. And I think it's something you and your community would probably like a lot as well.
No, absolutely. That is something that over with the Mayo Media Network, we do tend to talk about. By the way, pass this along to your product team. We have to record our show Monday night and Wednesday night. So the earlier those lines get up, that's certainly, we would love to talk about those over and unders on the, on the Mayo Media show, but sometimes it's a little tough. But
no, sure. Yeah, I'll definitely pass that along. I know we do our single stat stuff up in the morning typically.
Yeah.
But yeah, I
get it. Anyway, but yeah, it's certainly something very directly applicable. I certainly love. I see that Jamie Benn's always up there, and I just can't stand that guy. Sometimes so I do love not just the overs. Sometimes you got to just take an under here or there. But no, I'm very excited for when PA gets into the PrizePicks space, because I do have I have my deposit ready to go.
Right. I guess a similar note is that sports betting has become legalized in Pennsylvania as of, I'm not sure, a few months ago. Has it been?
It's been, I think, over a year now. It's been I think FanDuel and DraftKings really the only ones who are ready to go right off the bat. And then
Barstool's in there, right?
I think Barstool just launched a couple months ago or a few months ago. I think that's that was the big news there. But
right.
I've always been a daily fantasy first type of guy.
That was my question. Yeah. Go ahead.
Yes. So I definitely dabble in it. I don't really think I think a lot of what comes down to in terms of my personal process when it comes to at least betting on hockey is taking advantage of late changing lines and just general news. You hear that a lot in NBA, oh, you got to react to this guy in, this guy out, and of course just given the more condensed nature of that game, it's a lot more directly applicable to guys' projections or whatever. Right. But you see huge names get ruled out, say like Jack Eichel, and the props do not move at all from any sports book. The money line will move, the total maybe, but there are guys who obviously take a big hit when Eichel's not playing, who you just sort of get this this same number, you just sort of take the under, and it's that's free value. Right. So that's probably the main thing that I try to focus on. And a lot of that you can get just by having a general podcast about hockey on for a given night, even if it's not PrizePicks specific. Right. I think that's a big part of it.
Right. Yeah, so definitely check it out. I mean, just keeping up to date with the injury news is probably reason enough to join Matt's community. I mean, it really is the truth. I know those player props are super beatable, and our game is very similar to that. So at least the single stat space of it is very similar to that. So for those of you, again, I'm gonna reiterate it, for those of you who are interested, Morningscape Pod is your place. Moving on though, man, I know, have you been in these Top Shot streets at all? I'm kind of curious to see your take on that. I know you're kind of early to a lot of this stuff, so are you bullish on it? Where you been?
Yeah, I'm certainly, I mostly trailed Davis Maddock on it, honestly. So I wasn't, and I hear him talk about a lot of the same things that I'm probably about to say. So, that was basically my introduction. I read the Bales piece. I said, oh, that's cool. And then I didn't really get into it then. So I got into it early enough where I sort of got on the like pre Brian Windhorst like sort of bulge. So like I have this Joel Embiid who I got for like a low serial. It's like one out of I don't know. You could pull up my evaluate that market. It's just moods. But like I bought that piece for like $300-400 and it's worth like at least 2K now. So, I pay attention to it. I got DJ into it. He pulled a pack the other day. So, I've been lucky enough to get one of the base packs, but I struck out on the other like 10. So, what about you? Like, do you have any sizable investments or whatever?
Nothing sizable, man. I kind of kicking myself because I read the Bills piece too, and I made my account as soon as I read it, and so I was early in that facet, and then I just kind of went on the back burner until PostBrian Windhorst piece.
Okay.
So I've been in the drops. I have yet to get a pack, but I missed the whole opportunity where like you could just get multiple packs in a day. There wasn't really any queue. You can just keep hopping over. Like I missed that, which is such a bummer, but so be it. So pretty much all my moments have been collected from like when I side bet my friends off, just like you bet your friends like I'll bet you $50 that like the Avs beat the Golden Knights, whatever. And like I ended up running up like debts with my friends and they want to pay it back at Top Shot. So all my moments are gifts that I've received like from them for what they owe me. So I still haven't gotten fully involved in it, but like as late as it feels we are in it, we're still like so early, we're still
that
top 1% of like the amount.
That's how it feels. And I run a lot of fantasy. I play some seasonal leagues too. And I'm just thinking of some conversations we've had where like people are just like, poo-pooing it. And it's just like, man, like, I get it. Like there are some, it's weird. It's a weird feeling, but there's just so much of the world's going digital at this point. It's just, I mean, you see something like Counter-Strike where these skins are going for ridiculous amounts of money. Right. And Counter-Strike itself is super popular, but I wouldn't say it's like at its peak right now. And the sort of skins community around it is just growing and growing. Like as a kids these days, shake your fist or whatever, they're going to be what drives a lot of this, digitization of memorabilia and collectibles. So that's a lot of I think what I come back to when I think like, oh, do I want to be a long-term investor or just try and get a quick profit and get out? And I just think that so much of the esports space in general, it sort of gives me a lot of hope that like, yeah, this is the way the world's going. Certainly 2020 did as well. We spent almost a year of basically everyone who's not essential being either working from home or just otherwise indoors a lot of the time. And I think we've seen just how society functions like that. And it's not ideal, but I think it's certainly possible. And I think a lot of the concepts that sort of grew out of this really rough period of time sort of make me a bit bullish on the idea that a lot of the world and a lot of your collectibles can be in a digital space without it being this super bizarre type concept.
Right. And I think on the same note, to anyone who is sort of like you said poo-pooing the idea of Top Shot, and I think that comes from a not understanding viewpoint, and I can relate to that because I don't understand it either right now. I have no idea what's going on, not a clue. Like I can see enough smart people on my timeline who are following this, yourself included, guys like Bales, guys like Matic, that I'm just like, okay, like I'm just gonna follow the smart money. Like that's really it, like I'm just gonna invest in what these smart people are investing in. Obviously you do your own research and you're responsible for your own money, but at some point it's like if enough smart people are telling you something, it's probably good to just follow that,
Yeah, it's as we learned with the GameStop crates, it's always good to be aligned with the the bigger wallets. So that's definitely something that I think is a good good mindset going forward for sure.
Absolutely. Well, Matt, I mean, I know we're running a little short on time with these Zoom meetings having 40-minute limits. So, so I really appreciate you coming on here, man. It was awesome to catch up with you. Before we go, can you please let the people know where they can interact with you, where they can find you? We'll have your Twitter up and stuff, but your Man Media Network stuff and all that.
Yeah, no, thank you for having me. It's been an absolute pleasure. So yeah, I am at Fake Moods on Twitter. You can find a lot of my personal stuff there. I don't tweet a ton of interesting stuff, but you can also find the podcast at Morningscape Pod. We always tweet out our episodes and whatnot. And also make sure to check out the Mayo Media Network, Fantasy Hockey Picks and Bets. That's also on YouTube, and it's also in your, Stitcher, Apple Podcast. You can find that there as well. DJ and I do the Tuesday and Thursday shows for that, which tend to be the larger, DFS days, the larger slates in general. So certainly something that we would suggest listening to both of our shows on Tuesdays and Thursdays.
Absolutely, man. That was awesome. We do a couple NHL strategy videos on here. I have a series called Board Breakdowns where I kind of just break down the entire board. That's something I'd love to have you or DJ on to come like sort of give us some strategy takes, give the people some as a community manager, I'm all for the community. So I want people to have the best sort of like stats, best people to listen to. So I think having you on that show would be awesome. Definitely something that I'd love to work out in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. That sounds great.
Awesome, man. Thank you so much for coming on, and have a good one.